In this demo, we'll take a look at how we can package up our application as a jar file for distribution. Here we have our application opened up in an IDE, in this case it's IntelliJ, and the application is in the exact state it was when we finished up the last demo. Now as we know, of course, we can run this from right inside of the IDE. We've done that a bunch of times. But we want to look at now at how we can distribute it around so people without the IDE can run it. Right? And we touched on this briefly back in Module 2. We're going to look at things a lot more closely now. Right, so now if I switch over to the folder where this is built out at. So here I am in the folder that contains the demos for this module, working on the CalcEngine demo right now, so let's go inside of there. And what we want to look at is the out folder. And again, this out folder is something that IntelliJ uses. Other systems use different folder structures. So I'm going to go down here into a production folder and CalcEngine. So this is the output from CalcEngine. And you see the only thing we see here is a COM folder. Remember that we said that building the Java applications creates a folder structure that corresponds to the package names. Right? So I say COM, Pluralsight. When I get inside of there, there's two folders, right? Because I have two packages that fall under com.pluralsight, CalcEngine and MyApp. And from a nomenclature standpoint, CalcEngine is considered to be a sub-package of com.pluralsight. There's no special relationship there other than how they're stored, but it's just the terminology that's used. The same way MyApp is a sub-package of com.pluralsight. If I go into MyApp, we see the class file for main, right? This is a compiled version of main. If we go back up to Pluralsight, go into CalcEngine, see all the class files there for all the compiled versions of the classes we have in that package. Right, so now if I want to jump back up here to COM, then I'll go up one more level to where CalcEngine is. Right, this is kind of the root of my package. So I should be able to run the program from here, right? So if I want to, I can go in here and I can open up a command prompt. So here we are on the command prompt. So if I want to run the program, I just type Java, and then the class that's my entry point, right, which is com.pluralsight.myapp.main. So now I just go ahead and hit enter, and of course the application runs. So that proves that if we were to actually take this COM folder and its contents and copy it over to another machine, as long as that machine had Java installed on it, we could run it on that machine just like this. But as we talked about, jar files are a much more convenient way to distribute our applications. So let's take a look at how we can actually create that jar file using the IDEs. We'll look first at doing it with IntelliJ, and then I'll show you as well how to do it in NetBeans. Again, of course, you could also use the actual jar utility. I've got the URL on screen for the documentation for the jar utility. We're going to focus on the IDEs for right now. So we go back here into IntelliJ. Now, IntelliJ is kind of interesting. It kind of uses I would say, kind of an unusual way, or at least a non-standard way of how you specify you want to create a jar file. Other environments tend to do it kind of more directly as part of the build process. IntelliJ actually has the generation of the jar as kind of something separate. So the way we set up the jar file in IntelliJ is we go to the File menu, go to one here called Project Structure. And you notice here under Project Settings here on the left, there's one option here called Artifacts. And artifacts are other things you can produce from the project. A jar file is considered an artifact in IntelliJ. So what we do is we go up to this plus sign up here, we choose that, and it says what kind of artifact do you want? Well, I want a jar artifact, and I want to generate a jar file from the modules that are in this project. So I'm going to go and choose that. And notice one of the options here when this dialog pops up is main class. So it says, well, do you want me to actually put a main class as the entry point in this? And we do want to do that. So I'm just going to choose the ... here, and I'm going to choose my com.pluralsight.myapp.main. So say OK. Now what this does once I choose that option is it actually will generate the manifest for this jar file specifying that that's the main entry point. And we'll see why that's useful in a minute. So go ahead and say OK. All right, so that's all set up now, so we'll say OK again. So now if I was to go off and just build my project right now, I still wouldn't have a jar file. In order to get the jar file, what I have to do is go to the Build menu, choose Build Artifacts. So it says, what do you want me to do? So it's CalcEngine jar. I want to build it. And so that now goes off and builds that jar file. Right? So what I want to do is let's go back to the file system now. So here we are in the file system. And you'll notice that before we just had that COM folder here, notice now that there's a meta.inf folder. Right? That's actually going to contain our manifest. If I go inside of here, it says manifest.mf. That's our manifest file. If I double click on this, you notice that it has an entry in here, main class, com.pluralsight.myapp.main. That actually gets included in the jar file, so we're able to just basically execute the jar file, and Java will know what class we want to run. right, so let's go ahead and close this guy up. I'm going to jump back up here to my out folder. And you notice here there's an artifacts folder. If I go inside of there, notice there's a folder called CalcEngine_jar. So that's our jar file. Right, so let's go ahead and open a command prompt in this location now. So here we are in the folder containing the jar file. And what's nice about this is that since the jar file actually specifies what the main entry point is, I can effectively just run the jar file. And just say Java. I'm going to use an option -jar, and then I'm going to put in the name of the jar file. So basically that tells Java to run this jar file. Because the jar file includes a manifest that says what the main entry point is, Java can figure out what class to run. So if I just go ahead and run this now, our application runs correctly. So you see, that's where the value of the jar files come in, is that not only do we have this nice kind of packaging of the whole application in a single file, but even the file includes the information necessary to run its contents. And there's other information that can be included in there as well. Now let's go back to our file system for a second. Now remember I mentioned that jar files follow the standard zip file format. And so we can actually explore inside of a jar file pretty easily. Now just note, there are utilities that will actually let you kind of generate the source code tied to the contents of the jar file. That's what we're looking at here. I just want to just show you what the structure of the inside of the jar file looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file, I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to paste it back in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change its name. I'm going to change its name to CalcEngine.zip. Now the reason I changed its name is because I'm on a Windows system right now. And on Windows, once it sees that that's a zip file extension, it will actually allow me to explore it as a zip file. So we'll go ahead and hit enter. Windows just prompts me to make sure I really do want to change the file name. I'll say yes. And so now when I double click on this CalcEngine.zip, I can now explore its contents. And you notice that it's looking very much like the folder we were looking at earlier. We see our com folder, Pluralsight, and then each of the package subfolders containing the class files. Right, so we can see the jar file really is just a zip file with the addition of that manifest. As I mentioned earlier, IntelliJ uses a very different process for generating the jar files than most other environments do. So I'd like to show you here just quickly inside of NetBeans how you set NetBeans to generate a jar file. So what I have open here is this Hello NetBeans project we created earlier in the course. We'll see this is really straightforward. I'm going to go over here to the project structure, right click, choose properties. You notice there's an option here, or a section to say on packaging. We're just going to choose packaging. And basically we'll say go ahead and create the jar file, compress the jar file, and we'll say OK. The simple fact of doing that, now when we build the project, NetBeans will now generate the jar file. So the jar file will just be part of the build process. So unlike IntelliJ, where generating the jar file was a separate process, here in NetBeans, it'll just be part of the overall build process.